Look! He pointed at the sky, and I turned to see a giant Antonio Torres torso growing out of the sky, clutching his throat in pain. His giant mouth split open, and he puked out a military helicopter. It was off balance at first, but soon recovered and flew down above London, headed right for this square. "His Honour, the President of the United States," Funny said. "The funniest Valentine, another me and another grandson." There was a circular emblem with a bald eagle on the side of the massive chopper, the Grand Seal of the United States. "And here come our 2 stars," Funny said. I followed his gaze and saw 2 figures flying towards us, buildings in the West End exploding in their wake. Obviously this was Dio and Cars, but following them were 3 giant Das Boot submarines flying close together. They were sailing across the treetops, heedlessly smashing any buildings in their way and firing a constant barrage of missiles. Boom, 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 exploding all around Dio, who wasn't making any particular effort to avoid or dodge them. Several missiles scored direct hits and his body was momentarily blown apart, but it reassembled instantly and Dio remained alive. Occasionally a missile would miss Dio and hit Cars, blowing him up, but he was back a moment later too. This was hopeless, I thought. They'd never have a winner. Neither one could ever die, no matter how much damage they did to each other, and both of them had figured that out a long time ago, and I could hear their laughter on the wind. They seemed to be having the time of their lives trashing the shit out of the city. And then from the back of the rubble came a wave of sand that swept over the buildings and swallowed Dio. Cars appeared to have added Goffalai Soundband Sandbound to his repertoire. Pulling Dio with it, the rubble scene came flowing towards us, turning into a whirlpool near the square that rose up into a giant pillar. More and more rubble was pulled into it, and the size of it expanded, and the density grew thicker, and when at last it stopped swirling, it was over 300 metres tall and 200 metres across, made of almost solid rock, like a giant mortar built right next to Piccadilly Circus. Without so much as a glance in our direction, Cars daintily landed at the tip of the Eros fountain and laughed at Dio. "How's that? The strength of that is dozens of times these puny buildings." But we could hear a faint sound growing from inside the pillar. Thud. Thud. Thud, 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 thud. Thud, 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 thud. Boom! A hole erupted in the side of the pillar, and Dio leapt out, half naked, and we just gaped at him, and Cars kept laughing. "Well done." Dio brushed the dust off his shoulders, laughing. "Whether we fight physically or with stance, nothing either of us does seems capable of overcoming our immortality." "Yet," Carr said, "but I'm still learning about stands. I may not be able to kill you, but I may be able to send you away, the same way I myself was once defeated." Dio sighed. "But I'm unable to acquire further stands, so I must have others fight for me. Cars, I won't give you time to learn more about stands. You're the one who'll be sent away into another dimension, ensuring you will never again return to this world." Then he raised a hand to the hovering helicopter, wagged the tips of his fingers ever so slightly, and the door of the chopper opened, and I saw the current President of the United States in person for the first time. The funniest Valentine had his curls cut short, but was otherwise identical to Funny. By my side, Funny let out a long breath. "Come on down, my minion, the funniest," Dio said, and swung his arm down hard. The funniest leapt out of the helicopter with no parachute. The other passengers looked alarmed, but the funniest himself was completely calm. "And your time to shine, Funny!" At Dio's cue, Funny broke into a run, headed for the place where the funniest was about to land. Right next to the Piccadilly Circus fountain, Funny stopped, braced himself, and spread out his arms as the funniest fell into them, and Funny didn't catch him, but clapped his hands together. And with that, the funniest was gone. Aha! Getting hit in the head didn't send you to a parallel world. Getting trapped between things did. Funny spread his hands again and turned towards Cars. "Donjon!" he said, grinning. "A magic trick," Cars said, still not clear on how Funny's stand worked. What do you think? Funny asked. Cars scratched his chin.
Doesn't matter either way. You get near me, you die.
I'll do just that. But you'll never see me coming. Here I come! Funny yelled, and broke into a run. Cars was ready for him, but unlike Dio, Funny was running on real human legs that didn't seem particularly fast. But just as Cars confidently spread his arms to grab him, it was like some frames dropped from the film I was watching. Not fast forward, like a moment of time skipped. Funny was in mid-jump one moment, and the next he'd already clapped his hands together. With a huge smile, Funny said, "Dans un," and trailed off. He must have thought dirty whatever had sent Cars to that parallel world, but Cars was still standing right where he was. He'd bent the upper half of his body like a crochet hook to avoid Funny's clap.
What?
DL said, which made it clear that momentary time skip that had assisted Funny's attack was his doing. Besides, Funny stood a humanoid stand with what looked like air tanks on its back. Cars looked at this and also said,
What?
I guess he was surprised because Dio hadn't shown his stand the whole time they were fighting. He kept it in reserve for this exact moment, and even though his stand attack had been timed perfectly, Carl's reflexes had been far greater than Dio or Funny had ever imagined.
Don't just stand there, Funny! One more time!
Dio yelled, and time began to skip all over the place. Clap, 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 clap. Funny never even hit the ground, but just came after Cars with everything he had. But every time his hands came together, Cars contorted his body further out of the way, slipping through Funny's grasp. God damn, Funny said, impressed despite himself with the speed of Cars' reaction. I'd figured out what Dio's stand power was. It could stop the flow of time. Dio's stand was right next to Funny, so it must be moving Funny while time was stopped, setting things up so all he had to do was bring his hands together. But in the instant that time started moving again, Cars was able to dodge. Warping his body to dodge another clap, Cars glanced over at Dio and grinned.
I figured out your stand,
he said. As Funny went to clap again, Dio grinned too.
A moment too late,
he said. Clap! 2 claps in rapid succession, and Cars was gone. I looked at Funny's hands. As if to make sure he'd gotten rid of Cars, Funny had his palms open, and there was another set of hands reaching out of them, wearing similar gloves. Funny had sent the funniest to the parallel world, and the funniest had then reached back into this one, which meant Funny and the funniest had the same power.
It was all part of the plan to create a rhythm and let him get comfortable,
Dio chuckled. The rule was 1 stand per person, but perhaps as the universe changed over, the same stands would crop up again. These two wouldn't have normally ever met, but Dio had brought them together. As my head wrestled with the scale of this plan, I noticed a thin black thread wrapped around my neck. Huh? Funny noticed it too. That thread extended from my neck to the funniest hands in his. Dio saw this and yelled,
Funny! Cut that hair!
Hair? Right, the thing round my neck wasn't thread, but black hair. A strand of Cars' hair, coming from the funniest inside of Funny. Yank! I was jerked into the air towards Funny, and my eyes met Dio's.
What the fuck?
He said. I don't know, Funny said, but I knew Funny was up to something, and I vanished into the palms of the funniest hands. We were in a rain-drenched park. Beyond the wet trees and mist, I could just make out some skyscrapers, and across the square I could see the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I was in New York, Manhattan Island, Central Park. In the parallel world the funniest had dragged me to. Where was Cars? I followed the hair wrapped around my neck, but instead found another Funny, his hands together. Huh? I thought. Why was Funny here before me? I could tell the hair around my neck was coming from this Funny's hands. This was the real Funny. For example, Dio could have guessed they couldn't catch Cars even with the time stop, and had the real Funny right here ahead of time to send Cars to yet another parallel world as soon as the funniest caught him off guard and sent him here. 2 layers away from the real world. The rabbit-eared stand was standing behind the real Funny here. Then logically the Funny that had been with me in Piccadilly Cross Circus was fake, but he'd been using dirty whatever, so 1 stand per person. There was no way that was fake. When he'd taken me to Monument Valley in that other world, Funny had shared his stand with the other Funny. If Funny was here, then they'd planned this before the Funniest jumped out of the helicopter, and the real one was already inside the Funniest, and the fake Funny had done his magic trick and the Funniest had vanished. In that instant, the Funniest had handed dirty whatever over to the fake Funny. Funny's hands were still clasped together, and he was not at all surprised to see me. Is the word funny even a real word anymore? How many times have I read that now? Is this why you took me to Monument Valley? I asked. A sort of fool your friends to fool your enemies deal? They were already planning on bringing me here, maybe? That too, Funny said. But we also wanted to verify that you are indeed a singularity. Do you know why Cars brought you here and is trying to take you further in? Precisely because you're a singularity. There is no other you in any other world. Cars has sniffed that out somehow, I'm sure of it. I'd like you to remember that fact, although I believe you were told as much by other me's in Monument Valley and Piccadilly Circus. And what meaning are you prescribing to me being this singularity? Obviously, I mean you have a role that is yours alone. The only meaning you could have is in your role. You do not exist in any parallel world, which means the real you can never be killed by any alternative yous. In other words, your path in life is a single possibility. Your true purpose, you must fulfill it. That said, even without knowing a thing about parallel worlds, the nature of the world is that we all fulfill our roles. You are a detective, that doesn't change. Nothing is added to that fact, but if you know that that role is yours and yours alone, perhaps you'll be less hesitant to perform that role. Are you looking at the future too? How can you speak in prophecies like this? We aren't the ones that see the future. Dio is, Funny said. He put his fingers to his temple and traced a line around his skull, Dio's crown of thorns. That? It isn't just decorative. I'd assumed it was just a device to help him manipulate Poochie. No, that's Dio's stand. The passion. We don't know the full extent of its power, but he can use that to read the future in great detail. But Dio has another stand? The one with the air tanks that can stop time? Yes, that is the world. You have a keen eye. Indeed, that is a terrifying stand. When he was a vampire, he could only stop time for 9 seconds. But with the power of the ultimate being, that has expanded considerably, and he can now stop time for nearly an hour. Holy shit, okay. Jesus, I said. How can you fight a stand like that? Funny shook his head. It is a terrifying stand, but there are ways to fight it. What really makes Dio Brandel formidable, to my mind, is the passion. The passion, huh? I thought. Passion in Italian. Was there some link to the Passion family Shabana Haruno had been part of? Anyway, I'm not interested and don't have a stand, so I'd quite like it if you could take me somewhere neither Dio nor Cars are, I said. I really wanted to go home to Fuku. I'm afraid you must go, Funny said. Huh? Where to? As the flow takes you. Then at last he moved his hands apart, and my body was yanked into his hands once more. This time Cars was there. I landed flat on my back on a wide open patch of land with him looking down at me.
Took you long enough, Jorge Joestar,
he said.
What were you doing?
Before I could answer, his fist hit me and sent me spinning through the air, but my cheekbone didn't break or anything, so I guess this was Cars holding back. Compared to his fight with Dio, anyway. When I landed, a disc popped out of my forehead, and Cars took that and stuck it in his own head for a moment, then went, and put it back into me so I could move again.
So this isn't the real world. It seems real enough,
he said, looking around. I looked around myself. It was very dark and there was nothing around us. I assumed that it was night, but there was no moon or stars above us. We must be near a country town of some sort, but from where we were there was hardly anything that looked like city lights. Yet unlike London, it wasn't completely deserted. There were still signs of life. I could see bonfires burning and even a few car headlights being used for illumination. But there was nothing in the sky above. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could tell it wasn't just cloudy either. There were no clouds, so why couldn't we see the moon and stars? This made no sense. Wait, I'd heard about this before, back in the real world. In Morio. Before Poochie sped up time, Just before he blasted through the history of the universe 36 times, Narancia handed me a phone, the Pebble phone. I'd spoken to Bruno Bucciolati. "The sky is gone pitch black, no moon or stars." He described this same thing. I let it go in one ear and out the other, but this was pretty fucked up, and I couldn't believe something this fucked up was happening everywhere. I ran across the dark field until I found a gate. It had the name of the school on it. Budagolka Academy. This was Morio.
"Hey, Jorge Joestar."
I'd been staring at the gate, lost in thought, and looked up to find Carr standing right next to me, looking exasperated.
"You have a bad habit of not hearing when people speak to you."
"Yeah, if I'm focused on something else. Sorry, what?"
"Look,"
he said, and nodded at the sky. I looked up, and some building had searchlights aimed upwards, and a light had caught a huge squid swimming through the sky. It was genuinely massive, at least a kilometre long. But even giant squids didn't ever get that long. And a moment later I realised I was looking up at the giant squid's mantle, but that itself was weird. Squids swim with their mantles upwards, but I should be looking at the underside right now. This squid was swimming upside down. What the... The squid seemed to be interested in Morio, and the huge eyes on either side of it were looking at us. I heard cries and shouts in the distance, and turned to see a giant sperm whale come over the horizon, also swimming upside down. It came up to the top of the sky and bit into the squid. The squid's tentacles writhed round its mouth, using its suckers to desperately fight back, but they just kept forcing the squid farther inside and soon vanished off the other horizon.
"This entire town is floating in the ocean, upside down,"
Carl said, as if stating the obvious. Given what we'd just seen, no other explanation seemed to fit. What was up with this parallel world? Were their worlds this batshit different? This was straight up fantasy or Fantasia. But no, that wasn't right. I wasn't sure about the ocean part, but Bucciolati and the others had reported the lack of stars and moon, and that was in the real world. I should follow up on that. I still had the Pebble phone. I took it out of my pocket. I'd forgotten to give it back to Narancia after talking to Bucciolati on the deck of Das Boot. I tried calling him. I hit redial and it rang. He answered. "Hello, Narancia," Bucciolati said. It's George." "Huh? Which one?" "Which? The adopted one." "The Japanese one, of course." "You've met some other George?" "We've got an English Jorge Joestar here." I might be a detective, but even my head was spinning.